Happy Easter, everyone. Thank you for carving some time out of your schedule to be with us today before brunch and Easter eggs and hunts and whatever it is that you have planned today. Now, whatever it is that you are going to do today, I'm going to bet that you don't do it every day. It's not the ordinary thing for people to go Easter egg hunting and so on. Ordinary is typically qualified as being nothing special or the run-of-the-mill. It is normal or the customary way of doing things. There are times in my life that I just want ordinary. Ordinary can be comfortable, but then there are times that I really just want to be comfortable. Depending on your personality, you may like a certain level of stability and normalcy in your life. Having normal in our life can give us a sense of stability and peace. We like normal. We all have routines that we are comfortable doing. And even if some of our ordinary and normal practices are not working for us, we can still become attached to them. On the other hand, the ordinary can be incredibly boring. When our lives just go around and round in the same pattern and everything is the same this year as it was last year, that can become kind of monotonous. Ordinary day after ordinary day can become dull. We feel stuck in a rut and we want to break out of it. There may be some things in your life that have become ordinary to you that you don't like. Sometimes we develop habits or even an entire lifestyle that becomes ordinary that we don't like too much and that we want to break. If ordinary isn't working for us, it can feel almost oppressive. Maybe you feel like you have an ordinary marriage or an ordinary job, or you live in an ordinary town, and you're looking for something more, something exciting. Easter is about the celebration of something extraordinary to save us from the ordinary. When normal wasn't working for the world, when the world was caught up in the same old that led nowhere, God decided to do something extraordinary. God saw that the ordinary practices of most people were leading them to dead ends. And so he did something that no one else had ever done. He sent Jesus, his son, into the world. Jesus lived on this earth for 33 years, spending most of that time living an ordinary life. And then he went public. He taught like no one else had ever taught. He lived like no one had ever lived, and he loved like no one had ever loved before. He had insights into life that people never had before. He told stories that forced people to challenge their assumptions about God and how life worked. He had an ability to attract crowds and crowds of people, like all great leaders do. He had an ability to attract people from all walks of life, from the most educated to the most marginalized, the poor, the sick, and people who were hated by the rest of society. People who were nothing like Jesus liked him and wanted to be around him because there was something extraordinary about him. Peter, in today's first reading, says Jesus went about doing good and healing people and acting with God's power. When people encountered Jesus, they were amazed and impressed that he spoke with such authority and with wisdom, as if he knew how the world worked. There is no record in the Gospels of people meeting Jesus and being bored by him, believing that he was just ordinary. In today's pop culture, Jesus is portrayed as this vanilla, wimpy, nice guy. Unfortunately, that image has been projected because many Christians have given a picture of Christianity as a religion that is just about becoming nice, because Jesus was nice. Folks, nobody encountered Jesus and thought that he was nice or ordinary. He was bold. He was provocative. He was a radical, a revolutionary. People met him and they were amazed by him. Others walked away healed of their diseases and healed in their hearts, convinced that he was the Messiah, the Son of God. Many of the religious leaders of the day became incredibly angry with him when they met him. In fact, he was so extraordinary that they found him to be a threat to their power, and so they worked together to kill him. Jesus certainly evoked a wide range of reactions, but not one soul ever walked away from Jesus thinking he was simply ordinary. God sent his Son into the world, who lived an extraordinary life. Then Jesus did something even more extraordinary. He did something that had never been done before and has not been done since. To show he was who he said he was, and to help break us out of the ordinary, he allowed himself to be beaten and whipped and then nailed to a cross. He allowed himself to be made to look completely and utterly foolish, to look like he had lost. And then 3 days later, he conquered the grave and rose from the dead. April Fools. Easter is not about being nice little bunnies and having them going around and doing ordinary Easter things. Just going through the motions of church, brunch, Easter egg hunt, dinner. Easter is a celebration of the most extraordinary event in history, the resurrection of Jesus from the dead. If you boil down Christianity to its most basic level, you could say that it is essentially about three things. One, it's a belief that Jesus is the Son of God. Two, it's a belief in an event. Jesus rose from the dead. He conquered the grave. And third, and this is the most relevant thing for us, the third part of Christianity is believing that because Jesus conquered death, we can also conquer death in all of its forms. We can conquer the ordinary trials and tribulations of life through his power. The same power that rose Jesus from the dead is available to you and to me. Now here's the twist. Access to Jesus and his power doesn't come from anything extraordinary. Believing in Jesus and in his resurrection doesn't often come from any extraordinary experience, but through the ordinary circumstances and practices. To help us understand that, we're going to take a look at the 20th chapter of St. John's Gospel. The Gospels are accounts about the life of Jesus, and there are 4 of them, written from 4 different people who wrote about the life of Jesus in the Bible: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. We're going to look at John's Gospel today. John writes, "Early on the first day of the week, while it was still dark, Mary Magdalene came to the tomb and saw that the stone had been removed from the tomb." Jesus died on a Friday night before the Sabbath, which for the Jewish people meant they couldn't do any form of work from Friday and sundown until Sunday morning. In order to bury Jesus, 2 of his friends quickly wrapped him in some linen cloths and placed him in the tomb. In the culture of that time, it was usual to anoint the body with perfumes, but because the Sabbath was coming, they didn't have a chance to anoint Jesus' body properly. Mary Magdalene, who was close to Jesus, was going to the tomb of Jesus on Sunday, not expecting a resurrection, not expecting anything extraordinary, but simply to anoint his body. She's doing something that would have been the ordinary custom of the day. But when she gets to the tomb, which is sort of like a little cave with a rock rolled across it, things aren't as she expected. The rock that had covered the tomb had been completely rolled away. When she looked in the tomb, the body was gone. So Mary runs back to Peter and the Apostle John, and she says, "They have taken the Lord out of the tomb, and we do not know where they have laid him." Mary sees that the tomb is empty, but she just assumes that Jesus' body had been stolen. So Peter and John make a mad dash to the tomb to find out what had happened and who stole the body. Like Mary, the apostles did not expect a resurrection of Jesus. They were essentially hiding. They were scared that now their leader had been killed, and they're probably next. But when they came to the tomb, they saw Jesus resurrected, and all his glory with big flashes of lightning and thunder and an amazing drum solo. And they believed that Jesus rose from the dead. Actually, that's not what happened. Verse 4 says, "The two were running together, and the other disciple, who is John, outran Peter and reached the tomb first. He bent down to look in and saw the linen wrappings lying there, but he did not go in." John more or less glances in and sees that Jesus isn't there, but there are some of Jesus' cloths that are just lying there. The next verse says, "Then Simon Peter came, following him, and went into the tomb. He saw the linen wrappings lying there, and the cloth that had been on Jesus' head, not lying with the linen wrappings, but rolled up in a place by itself." So Peter is a little bit more observant here. Imagine, if you will, that you came home one day and things are a little bit out of place or slightly rearranged. So you start to examine it a little bit more. Kind of weird. Peter is looking closely here because common robbers wouldn't just come into the tomb and take the body, but also take the time to neatly fold the burial cloths before taking off. Robbers would steal the cloths, the only thing of value in the place, and they would leave the body there. The next verse says, "Then the other disciple, who is John, who reached the tomb first, also went in, and he saw and believed." We see in this whole account this deepening insight and understanding of what they're looking at here. First, the disciples glance in at the scene. Then Peter takes a closer look and begins to think about what is actually being seen here. Then John takes in the whole scene, and he understands that the only explanation can be that Jesus has really risen from the dead. The only people that would have had a motivation to move Jesus were robbers. And when he saw it clear that it wasn't robbers, the only possible reason the tomb was empty was because Jesus rose from the dead. John believed the tomb was empty because Jesus had risen from the dead. He had conquered the grave. John looked at some ordinary things and realized something extraordinary had happened. As you read through the Gospels, you find that although Jesus does appear to the apostles and they become witnesses to the resurrection, he does that in very ordinary ways. He shows them the nail marks in his hands. He eats with them. He takes long walks with them, and he talks to them. Jesus rose from the dead, and he conquered the grave. But he didn't just do some magic tricks to prove that he was risen. He showed them the extraordinary through the ordinary. And this is what Easter is about. Easter is about the celebration of the most extraordinary event in history. An event that has the power to change our ordinary lives through seemingly ordinary methods. We see this happen to the apostles who followed Jesus. When Jesus was crucified, his closest followers ran away from him. Peter denied even knowing Jesus right before his crucifixion. They were hiding in their rooms, scared to death that they were next. Then these ordinary guys went on to do extraordinary things. They encountered the risen Christ, and their lives were transformed. Suddenly, they began to boldly preach about Jesus and his resurrection. God started using them to heal people. Eventually, this group of people turned the whole world upside down. Enough so that 2,000 years later, halfway across the world from where it happened, we're still celebrating it. Easter is about the most extraordinary event in history, and it has the power to change our ordinary lives. The power of Easter can change the ordinary things about your life that you don't want to be ordinary. If it has become ordinary in your marriage that you don't talk to one another and you've hit a dead end, Jesus' resurrection has the power to bring your marriage back to life. Maybe it has become ordinary for you to not even talk to your kids or carry on a real conversation with them. Maybe it's become ordinary to drink more than you want to drink. Maybe it's ordinary for you to just run around busy all the time, but you can't quite seem to get off that treadmill. Ordinary may not be working for you, but you aren't sure how to get out of your ordinary routine. What has become ordinary for your life that you wish wasn't? We've all got that. What has become ordinary in your life that you wish wasn't? If ordinary isn't working for you anymore, let me let you in on a little secret. No one ever said it has to stay that way. The same extraordinary power that brought Jesus to life is available to you. And that power is available to you through some very ordinary practices. When you look at a successful athlete, they often have very ordinary schedules. They practice routines over and over again that lead to extraordinary results. We have access to the extraordinary power of Jesus through the same very ordinary practices. Over the next few weeks, we're going to be diving into this concept, and we invite you to join us, even if that's not your normal thing to do on a Sunday. We're going to talk about how some ordinary practices in our lives can bring an extraordinary transformation and change in our lives. So if your ordinary isn't working, if you want to see some extraordinary results, join us next week again and see how a life lived with the risen Christ is anything but ordinary. May God bless you all.